the Neena ji?
Was the fact that when I was doing researching about the birds that we find, the birds and the animals, and so when I started researching on the birds that were found in Ayodhya, and why did I choose these concepts? So the reason I chose to describe a city like this is because, see, when we come to, let's say, a city like you're in Melbourne, I'm in Delhi NCR. So what do we see in a city? We see cars, we see roads, we see homes, log. लोग जैसे हैं, so the people will be the same across the world, right? We see the same people, right? There's no change. Okay, sure, little bit of change in clothing is not a problem, but that is describing the people of the city, like in the sense that that's not the essence of the city. Yeah, of course, they are the people who built the city and all of that. But how do you describe? So, for example, when we talk of New York, what comes to mind immediately? So, you think of all the streets and you think of the grid pattern, the way it is built, okay? And then you think of the big monuments of New York, you think of the museums, right? So, you don't think of the average man on the street, because nowadays people are almost wearing the same clothes. So I thought that was, for another book, I will give these kind of descriptions, the kind of birds you see. And in ancient times, of course, there are birds and there are animals, because that was the mode of transport. That is how things were done, right? So horses, this, that, and that's why they are mentioned. So, for example, the elephant is like your today's Jaguar or like Mercedes, right? Only the rich could afford it, right?
These are anything with lots of horsepower.
And the term even horsepower
comes from the same thing. How many horses were there in your chariot, basically?
Exactly. So, so we are still following these, and let's face it, the cars have come only a few hundred years ago, like 100 to 100. So the ancient cities and all these places were only about chariots, horses, and all these things, right? Therefore, my research is about the books and the chariots. In the book, I have spoken about the chariots, the other animals, and what were there, and what were the houses like, what were the roads like. So this is what my research is. Then the other thing, when I was researching the birds, there is a particular bird that is mentioned, and it is called cronch. So I started researching this bird. Of course, there were meanings given that cronch is this and cronch is that, and I looked at certain things. I wanted to know what is cronch. So in my research, I obviously knew there is, reading the scriptures, that there is a dweep called Cronch Dweep. So in the description of the earth, like we are on Jambu, like you're not on Jambu Dweep now, because Jambu Dweep is
Shalmali. Australia is called Shalmali Dweep.
Oh, what is the proof for it being Shalmali?
It's written in Mahabharata. So all the names of the Dweepas, if you map them according to their characteristics and the people and the distances and everything, and it's in Ramayana as well, like where Ram was sending their army to search for Sita here, Sita there, go to Shalmali, go beyond. So they came all the way to Shalmali Dweep, and this is last before reaching the pole, actually, Antarctica. So this is the last island.
So in my research, there's a dweep called Cronch Dweep, and it says that it is in a sea of dahi. It is in a sea of, wait, I'll just tell you. It is on page 249. So the shlok implies that the island of Cronch is in the ocean, like it has been churned, just as curd is churned to create buttermilk. So any idiot can read it and say, well, there are no oceans where there are buttermilk or something like that, right? Any ignorant or idiot. But what this is basically describing is ice. It's describing broken ice. And I said, if there is a bird if there is an island called Cronch, most likely either there are lots of cronch on that dweep or it looks like a cronch. So in my research for that bird, I started zooming on all the continents. So when I started zooming on all all the continents, I was there was a bird. I was torn between two birds. So there was a curlew. So and then there was a grus, common crane.
Common.
Saras, grus. Okay. So I said either it will be like a grus, like a common crane, or it will be like a curlew, and I'm going to figure it out now. So I sat for many days. And by the way, I'm just making this in gist. It took me 3 months to figure it out, right? To do the research. Just on one thing, it took me 3 months. Because you think about it, and then you're like, okay, let me look at this, and obviously you're not spending 24 hours on this. So then I said, let me go and look what I found. So this is the Cronch. And this is, this is the Antarctica. And so this is how it looks like. And I've turned it around so it matches this.
Yeah.
And I said, well, this is Cronch Dweep. And then I zoomed into pictures of Cronch Dweep from, the colored pictures. And of course, it looks like curd, like it's just been churned because of
there
the
are icebergs everywhere. And even just beneath the surface, there's so much ice that even when you look at water, it appears white actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, I have found the right bird. And while doing that, I was very interested that I found all of this. And, and then somebody once was arguing ki Cronch Dweep, this is not Cronch Dweep and something else is Cronch Dweep. I said, no, I've done the research. You take a look. It looks like a Cronch and it looks like a curlew. When I've given the pictures
and
side
the
by side.
characteristics are matching. The water around. Nowhere else in any ocean you see the water like curd or, curdled kind of water. You won't see any.
Correct. And an island that looks like a bird. Yeah.
North Pole or Arctic is not like that. Only Antarctic is like that.
Correct. So these were two very interesting facets that really blew my mind. And I'm very helpful that, there were right people. Because, at that point I was like, do you know this is written in the Ramayana? And I didn't know what to do with that information because it was like, how much do I give weightage to it? And I wanted to give it full weightage. So people said, why did you explore these aspects? I said, see, I did not want to be that Indologist who has degrees ki maine yahan se padhai ki hai, I've studied here, I've studied there, I have this degree, I have that degree. Those degrees are useless. If I come to you, I ask you a question. So a doctor, no matter how many degrees are hung on his wall, you go to him and you tell him, doctor, I'm having these bizarre symptoms. I'm not able to make sense of it. And then he says, oh, it's all in your mind. That doctor, those degrees are useless. And he says, this is all your fantastical imagination.
These days, I am meeting a lot of people like you who do not have PhDs, so-called PhDs, who are not Indologists by profession or anything, yet have done such a detailed research on all these things. And you guys have done such a great dharma. And you have started replacing all the adharma that was done by so-called mainstream historians, mainstream PhD scholars. I have no idea why they did not study anything, or maybe they might have some sort of a sinister adharmic agenda, and that's why they didn't do what this. But yeah, you have done a great service.
Thank you. So I think that had they been doing that job well, there was no reason for people like us to do these things.
Yes.
And what people do not realize is that if you are going to take and sit and occupy a position in which you're supposed to, churn out this kind of work or do these kind of things, see, ultimately, when we talk of dharma, when we talk of Brahmanism, when we talk of these things, the intellectuals of any country are the Brahmins of that country. Any city, the religious people and the intellectuals, right? So this is basically having a high degree of intelligence. Now, intelligence is a very sharp sword. You can either aim it to or a very sharp pencil or it's a very sharp. So now with that pencil, either you can write something, do something, research something, or you can take the pencil to kill yourself. Right? And what these intellectuals were doing was that they were sharpening their pencils
To kill
to scratch us only. To scratch us.
Earlier they were poking us, and now it's more like killing themselves. See how
They
many millions and billions of dollars have gone into all these kinds of research which had some sort of adharmic agenda behind, and still truth was covered in so many layers and so many ways. Even if they found the truth, they didn't value it, they didn't feel like presenting it to the world. So today common people like you, like me, are spending so many hours in reading, researching, and bringing the truth to the world.
Correct. And one thing I want to tell you, that irrelevance is the new retirement. And so do we even know these people? We don't.
I love that.
They retired themselves with irrelevance. I mean, there are so many positions that are there, but when you look at their work, there's nothing of substance. There is nothing that they can say, look, I studied this, I researched this, and this is what has come out of it. And people want to read things, people want to know things. That curiosity in people, they're not satiating. It's some random thing that they're covering. And what is the basis? What do the scriptures say? They've picked up one little thing and they're saying, no, this is not the thing, that is the thing. They've totally twisted the meaning of things. For generations, we've been carrying on that meaning. Then give us proof, then give us that. So they have one little thing, they've twisted things out of that. So I notice a lot of these things also.
Today, at least, we have, a lot of archaeological proof. We have softwares to bring out the astronomical proofs from any scripture or anything. So we do not have any problem about timeline, this, that, nothing like that. The scientific instruments are so sophisticated that you can carbon date anything and everything. And so people like you doing research, first thing is you do not have some sort of a fear or greed oriented agenda which says, oh, I need my PhD only, I need $1 million grant. What if I keep saying that instead of 2-3 years my PhD is taking 10-15 years? Grants happen, grants are given like that, and then till then you are just filling up your bank account or anything like that. You do not have any dirty agenda like that. So your total interest is, okay, if this is what I found, here what it is. So
yes, my agenda was very exploratory.
Yeah.
I did not come with an agenda that, no, I'm going to say it was a hippopotamus. If I did not find the proof, if Meenakshi ji did not tell me that, Neena, they've found hippopotamus, they've also found rhinoceros, please take a look. They've excavated those in this area and that. So why did she say this area? Because those areas are connected. So, this in this way.
And what I love about one of the things that you did, that you didn't take a shortcut. You didn't say, oh, I will read the commentary over commentary over commentary over commentary and somebody's commentary and will take something from here, something from there, and just on the name, just because I want to publish my own book and be an author and no matter what, and you publish something. No, you did the proper Sanskrit study and you went all the way to learn the Sanskrit, which is so difficult, and even in today's time you are saying you couldn't find the right teachers to explain the meaning and to interpret it for you. See how much difficulty you have gone through. So in order to bring the truth out, you didn't take any shortcut, and you do not have any hidden agendas like that. So this is the biggest dharma service that all the intellectual Kshatriya kind of people, intellectual warriors need to do these days, that at least wake up, whatever truth you can bring about. But for that, your sadhana should be there. That was your sadhana when you went on to learn Sanskrit, when you went on hours and hours, and you live in a family, you have other family responsibilities, you are a female. You didn't say, no, today I have a headache, or today I am missing my party, or today I am not doing my child's work or my family's work, or this responsibility, that. You did not give any excuse or anything. neither did you slow down. So that's a sadhana in itself. Every dharma yogi needs to be a sadhak like you, who is pursuing truth and honestly by doing all
Yeah.
the homework and grind work that we need to do, not shying
Yes.
away from the hard work at all. Then whatever
Yes.
it takes, and you didn't know it will take 5 days or 5 years to publish that book. You came to a conclusion, okay, this much research is enough to publish one book. Maybe your future topics are already there with you, you are working on them, and you will come out with so every seeker here needs to learn that tapasya is there, sadhana is there, and that tapasya and sadhana we not only do to bring the truth and go to the highest epitome of samadhi for reaching samadhi. It is also done to establish and bring out the truth, to establish dharma into this world. So
Yes.
a great work that you have done,
Thank
seriously.
you. Thank you. And some people even said, what if, you've taken out research? What if it was not a hippo? What if this was not there? What if this weapon did not look like this? So, for example, I've given, there's this weapon called Ashkahini. Ashkahini is the army. There is this weapon called Shatagni. So, I said, what if the weapon is not like that? I said, listen, this time that has gone by is very, very old. So, whatever I have drawn is drawn by what is given to me, right? And whatever my talent or my brain allowed me. If somebody else comes out with all the things and makes a better weapon, or says that this is why it is because this is the information they got and it is on top of my research, then why should it not be changed? I said, then sure, let him take the credit.
Depending upon, we keep excavating stuff, we keep on learning new things. Tomorrow some other manuscript of Ramayana may be found, and then what will you do? We will have to change that. So it's an ongoing journey actually, and it's only true to the point of time that okay, it's true today, may not be. That's what science is, that's what scientific research is.
Correct. And so the thing was that if a Shatagni is excavated and it turns out to be slightly different than mine, so what is the problem? See, my ego is not attached to the drawing. It's not attached. There is no ego. It's like, this is what I could figure out. You can figure out better things, please go ahead and do that. And if you can really excavate the Shatagni and bring it to me, I'd be the happiest person, because at least I'll feel satiated that this is what I imagined, and okay, so these are the differences, this is what I missed out. So so
people cannot do that with mainstream historians and stuff. You cannot challenge what they have written. You cannot question the proof or this or that, or how did they derive this thing or that thing. You are being an easy person. You said rightly, your ego is not attached to the work that you have done. So it was only about bringing the truth, and these are the things that I am able to process and research, and I presented the truth that way. So
yeah. So another example I'll give you in the version, in the Gita Press version, there is this description that the houses are ashtapad. So I said, what is this? And some people gave some description. Some people, so this is mentioned on page 102. Ashtapad akara. So I said, what is this? And somebody said, oh well, it looks like this, and it looks like a chessboard, because Asht is 8. So I said, 8 steps. So, but when I read the description, see, because I was reading the description and this, it said that the houses in Ayodhya were made up of gold. So Ayodhya was also Sone ki Ayodhya. So they say na Sone ki Lanka. So Ayodhya was also Sone ki. So he said that the houses were gold colored. Clearly it's mentioned, Sone ke bane ghar the. So I said, okay. Then I looked at, I went into detail. I looked at the meaning of Ashtapad, and it says that 8 steps. So what is 8 steps? So gold plating takes 8 steps. That is the reason it's called Ashtapad Akar. Now, Akar in Sanskrit means color as well as shape.
Ah.
So you see, so it said Ashtapad, and so in the translation, I was like, how the hell does this become gold? And then I said, and they're all based on Vimans. So then I said, let me go research Vimans. So then I went, and when I started researching Vimans, I came to Sharanga Sutradhara. That is also another very, very interesting book. And in that, the palaces of Ayodhya and all of that, in that it said that the original Viman, and no, sorry, it's Samranga Sutradhar. Samranga Sutradhar. So in Samranga Sutradhar, it is written by King Bhoj. He said that the first few Vimans that were built were made up of gold, or like they had gold in them, or they were gold plated, because it's the descriptions that are given them, it's the description that is given there. So when I read that, I was, they were golden, beautiful, and studded with gems. And then I said, no wonder then the houses of Ayodhya were golden and beautiful and studded with gems, because they were mimicking the Vimans of the gods. And so then everything made sense, but as a novice, when I first started reading all of this, it was so different for me. Then I said, wait, we still put so much gold in our temples, right? And in fact, if you take a look at the Garbhagriha of the temples, they're all full of gold. The gods, this is how we honor the gods, this is how we do that. And then stones. So for example, I remember I used to devour these interior design books. I used to love all these interior design books. And I remember looking at this house of a very wealthy person in the US, and their bedroom was full of pearls. There were strings of pearls in the bedroom, like it was on the wall. The whole wall was full of strings of pearls. And so the concept behind it was that the wife of the gentleman really liked pearls, so he had a wall that was full of real pearls. And I said, if people in today's day and age can do that, well, how come the ancients couldn't? Obviously, they had all the wealth, and they had all the, this was basic decoration for
Yes.
them. And of course, and in importing all of this, in getting all of this, they're also providing so much of jobs and value. They're creating value. So why wouldn't these things exist in the past? Because, we have this tendency, we've been taught that the ancient man was like this. And, we have these images that show that he's poor, he's dirty.
All that, yes, all that stuff comes from the Western world, basically. And there is no doubt there was poverty. There is no doubt they did not have technology before that. There is no doubt that these areas, civilization as such, did not existed in its rich and wealthy way, the way it existed in India. So definitely when they are writing the history, they write it like that. It's just that we never asserted, and people from our side never came up and said, that might be your history. It can't be my history.
Not our history, right? This is so. What happens to a lot of Indians who are bred on this sort of ancient man, or this sort of this is there's a word called cognitive dissonance, because it's like, they were supposed to be like this, and this is supposed to be like this. This doesn't match. Who is lying? And the one, and they look around, they look at the poverty today, they're like, no, this must be lying. But then no, this is not the case. There is also Antilla in Bombay, that is a $2 billion house. So the people live like that, right? In the past also they must be living like that. So you see, so anyway, so these are very interesting concepts. And of course, as my book has gotten popularity, as people read, as people did all these things, they were like, but how can it be? How can it be? I said, why shouldn't it be? We put so many expensive things. We put such expensive art in our homes. The art.
Lakshmi has to be, abundance has to be, enjoyed. Abundance has to be honored by using it. That's how Lakshmi has to be with you, on you, with you all the time. Lakshmi, first of all, comes on your buddhi, and then it comes on your life as well. So that is how
Correct.
Lakshmi is. Before even having Saraswati, you need to have Lakshmi on you. Otherwise, even Saraswati will not happen to your buddhi.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
and this
You're
idea
very
of
right.
poverty, this idea of people living with, scarcity, poverty, and badly, and that is somehow is connected to as being good. And so all that is just a Western concept. It's not an Indian concept.
Simple living.
High thinking. No, rich living and high thinking is also
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
That is
In
where we
fact,
come from.
yeah, it has to be opulent living. You have to live well. When you walk into your house, it has to give you joy. This is the basic principle of Vastu Shastra. This is the basic
No,
principle of Feng
even
Shui.
today, what people don't realize it, 11.7% of the world's gold is with Indian ladies in
Yes.
the household.
That is the declared one.
That is a declared one. So
I don't
imagine how much gold Indian women have in the form of jewelry, this, that, and everything. So
Yeah.
people just do not understand that. And
And
their high living is possible, The sanskar from the point of view of sanskar, from the point of view of dharma, India is the only place. Indians are the only ones who understand what dharma is, or that too about
yeah.
what it is for the entire humanity.
Yeah. In fact, most wealthy people, when I see their homes or something, and I'm not talking of the miserly wealthy, there are two types of wealthy
Yes.
people, right? The
The
misers,
content wealthy kind of you're talking about, yeah.
yeah, and I'm talking about the regular wealthy people. So when you go to the house is beautiful, they'll have good food, they'll look after you, everything is
Yes.
good about them.
Yes.
And so that is the real life. That is how you live well. You live opulently. And by opulent, I don't mean the terrible, decadent sort of, terrible, the negative side of opulence, wherein
See,
you're
the wealth, how you acquired wealth, that is also part of our dharma. That you should acquire wealth through dharmic ways. Only when you start acquiring, stealing, taking it forcefully, grabbing it from somebody, snatching it from somebody, or doing some illegal activities sinisterly on the name of mining and holding all the mines together. That's what happens in Australia. So when you are doing all this kind of ways, adharmic ways, when you go about gathering wealth, that is when only people start saying, oh, wealth is bad. Wealth is not bad. Lakshmi in itself is not bad. How you
Yeah.
reached there, how you acquired everything, that is
Yeah.
what matters in the end.
Correct. You're right on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Most
Neeraji.
welcome.
And I will really, suggest all my viewers to read these books in Hindi or in English, whichever language you prefer. Read these books and read it just to feel the opulence. We feel that opulence. It's so hard to see these days. You don't see houses built of gold or anything. You can go to Golden Temple at max. You can, even today, in today's time, we are not even allowed in the Garbhagriha of lot of temples in India, so you cannot go there.
So I'll tell you. So in this book, I've shown the Golden Temple, and also I've shown there is a very beautiful temple. It's the Sri Narayani Temple. In this is a temple in the south. It has double the amount of gold that Golden Temple has.
Wow.
Yes,
Sri
it's double.
Narayani in south.
Yeah.
I'll definitely go and visit it someday.
Yeah. It's very, very beautiful. It's on page 106 in the English version of the book. So there are two versions, English and Hindi. And I've
Your book is like a Lakshmi ka Ashirwad, Seriously. That is how it's sounding to me since last hour, that it feels so rich, so abundant.
Yeah, and so one of the things is that Indians carry so much shame with regards to wealth and gold, and in asking for prices, in putting a price, in asking for fees, in asking for money, in asking for commissions, in asking for this, they feel so much shame, and there's this wrong concept that this is wrong or adharmic, or you can't ask for money. Anybody in the spiritual world should not ask for money.
I had
This
to
is the
create a special video why you should pay to gurus and why you should pay to your acharyas and in how many ways you can pay your acharyas, because if you don't, your punya is gone and then you will suffer from disease because you got a body, human body, and that was it.
I have written the same thing in my book. In the Falshruti
okay.
also I've written that if you will steal people's knowledge or wealth or anything, you're going to suffer the consequences of it. People don't realize. And the Dharma Shastras, they indicate very clearly that you have to give 10% of the wealth that you have earned to gurus, to Devi Devtas, and to temples, to Dharma gurus, to your gurus, to Dharma gurus, and all of that. And why you have to do that is because of them you are being sustained. Because of the knowledge that you get. Because and it's very clear, it's 10%, it's it's equal, so there is, if I have to find an equivalent, then that's like tithing in the Christians and zakat in the Muslim. So what is it for the Hindus? So the Hindus also have to donate. It's it's a dharmic donation that they have to make. And that's 10%. And so why to the temples? This is the reason why the ancient Hindu kings and queens are also constructing temples. Because they have to look after the god. The god, it is the god that is giving to them. That is why they were giving.
Somehow it is fed into the Indian psyche that, only rich people will donate money for temple or money for this or that. No, the entire village was involved. Even the poorest farmer was involved in giving and donating, and he could give, the crop, whatever he was growing, he was able to donate. So he was sending that to the temple. 10% of his crop was 10% was there.
It's like prasad. When you give prasad, the pandit will take one laddu, give it to God, and the rest of it you keep it with you, right? That becomes prasad. So that's what happens even when you give 10% of your dakshinas. This is not dakshina. Dakshina is fees. So when you give, your dharma thing that you give, here, and so that becomes your whole salary. Then becomes prasad. So all your crop will become prasad after that. So in ancient times, because the temples were feeding so many people, so there, and then that deed is a punya. So punya, so you've done your deed, you've done that. So in ancient times, therefore, so let's say he's giving crops, somebody is giving cows, because the temples are feeding people every day. So you have to have, and even the poor, in fact, you'd be surprised. I was watching when the Ram Mandir thing was going on, there were beggars who donated. See, so wonderful. So if a beggar can donate, anybody else can also. And how much they donated in lakhs. Bunch of beggars would donate, they would do these things. So it's so beautiful, and that it is everything.
Yeah, it was said that even the people, those who were sweeping the road around, even all the municipality workers, which you can imagine that they are on the lowest possible pay grade in India, and even they donated for the temple.
In fact, they did not need to donate because they were doing Shramdan.
Still from their side, they were like, no, if I earn this much, I am also giving donation. Just even if it was the little amount, they still gave, thinking that some of my punya karmas will be rectified by doing that.
Yes, and so either you give monetary or you give
Shramdan.
Shramdan, or you give, let's say, Annadan, or something like that you give. So the farmer will give Ann. So the one who has cows will give cows. So the people like us will give our intellectual dan.
That's what Vidya Dan.
Vidyadan. So, in all of this, so in fact, that's what I'm saying. That's the greatness, right? The ones who were doing Shram Seva, they didn't need to do that, but they did it, and which is their greatness, and it is the greatness of our civilization. So every single person is supposed to give. In fact, we spoke about opulence. In Falshruti, I have mentioned it, that, that by reading this book, your mind, and so the reasons are not, it's not very easily explainable in words, but I'll just give you an example. Anytime that you expose yourself to something bigger or better,
Yes.
your mind doesn't go back to what it was. It expands its horizon. This is what they talk about exposure. Exposure. What is exposure at the end of the day? What is all this? What is expand your mind to see what all can exist? So once you start doing that, your mind starts accepting wealth. Your mind starts accepting opulence. Your mind starts believing. Your mind starts doing it. And also you have that example that, our forefathers were like this and we have to be like this. And it irritates me to no end where, in India, there is this whole thing about preaching poverty. Poverty is good.
I did write an article about wealth consciousness. चेतना बिल्कुल बहुत ही opulent सी and Lakshmi oriented abundant चेतना. So how to develop that consciousness? And you are right, by reading all these, opening your brain, opening the horizon of your brain so that the abundance becomes a conscious fact in you. Your neurology of your brain is expanded forever to accept wealth, and because you have acquired it in a dharmic way.
Yes. I wrote it as a Phalshruti. I said, here, your mind will expand and you will start having, you'll start accepting more opulence and abundance, whatever you want. And, this is one of the Phalshrutis that is written in the Valmiki Ramayana itself.
Oh, okay.
So what are the Shrutis of Valmiki Ramayana? You will have valorous sons. How will you have valorous sons? Because you are going to imbibe the qualities of Ram. Those who want to acquire kingdoms will be able to acquire kingdoms. How will they acquire kingdoms? Because some basic strategies are written that see, as a army officer's daughter, I could understand if you can't see a man's hands, if you can't see Ram Bhagwan's hands when he's putting the bow and arrow together, and you only see it right before he shoots it, then that means that it's practice that has done. So you want to become a great king, you want to acquire kingdoms, you start learning how to befriend people, you start learning how to practice, and you start learning strategy. You are going to acquire kingdom once you put your mind to it. Somebody's shown you the path how to do that. How difficult is it then after that? So all the Phalshrutis in the Ramayana, each one of them is better than the other, and each one of them can be fulfilled just by reading the Ramayana. So whether it is conquering lands, whether it is conquering kingdoms, whether it is having valorous sons, whether it is having opulent wealth, whether it is just having the best life, whether it is dharma, all of it can be acquired. All the Phalshrutis can be acquired by reading the Ramayana. This is the Phalshruti that the Ramayana gives you.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much, Neena ji.
Most welcome.
Yeah, I would really love to have another podcast with you someday about, some more stuff that you have researched, because I know you have researched a lot. So we'll have that. But I am really thankful to you for doing such a great service to the humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.